Okay, hello Cloud Gurus and welcome to this lecture. In this lecture, we're going to look at how we can share S3 buckets across accounts. Now, this is mostly a theoretical lecture, but we will have a lab where we can show you how to enable access to S3 from one AWS account to another. You must have done all the steps in AWS organizations in order for this lab to work. So you must have done all the steps in the last lecture. If you haven't, you just want to watch along, don't worry. We're not going anywhere after this lecture. You don't need these buckets shared across accounts. We're not going to be using that again. It is a really important exam topic that does come up. So there are 3 different ways to share S3 buckets across accounts. First one is using bucket policies. Now, if you remember, bucket policies apply across the entire bucket. We're going to use bucket policies in conjunction with identity access management. So this is going to apply across the entire bucket, and it's programmatic access only, which means that you wouldn't be able to do this using the console. The other way is by using bucket access control lists. Now, if you remember, bucket ACLs go all the way down to individual objects. So you use these in conjunction with identity access management. Again, this is going to be programmatic access only. Because we don't come from a developer background, we want to be able to do this and see it in the console. So in this lecture, what we're going to look at doing is how we can do this using identity access management roles. And this gives you programmatic and console access as well. Now, it's kind of annoying because we cover off roles in a lot more detail in the next section of the course. A role is just a way of temporarily granting access to an AWS resource, either from another AWS service such as EC2 or by other AWS accounts. And we will cover it off in EC2 in the next section of the course. We'll show you how we can use roles to access S3. But in this one, what we're going to do is create an IAM role that will allow us to access an S3 bucket in another AWS account. This is a lab, and you will need to log into the AWS console. Okay, so I've logged into the AWS console. This is a Cloud Guru account A. If I go over to my organization, I'll be able to see that this is the root account. So you can see it here. It's got the little star, the master account. Now, the account I want to add is this one here. I've blurred out the account IDs, but that's what I'm going to go ahead and add. So I'm going to go over to my services, and what I want to do is go down to Identity Access Management. What we're going to do is create our first role. So we click on role, let's hit create role. And here we've got different types of trusted entities. So an AWS service, so we could give this role to an EC2 instance, for example. We're not going to do that. We're going to give it to another AWS account. So let's click up there. And I want you to paste in the account number of your other account in here, and then go ahead and hit next. And then what we want to do is create a role, and we're going to attach some policies to this role. So this is what gives us our access. So I'm going to type in S3, and I want to give S3 full access to this role. And that's it. I don't want them to be able to use any other services such as EC2, etc. So next I'm going to add my tags. I'm just going to leave that as blank, and I'm going to give my role a name, and we'll call it S3, and then we'll call it cross-account access, something like that. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit create role. So that has now created my role. I can see it in here. And you'll be able to notice here it says, give this link to users who can switch roles in the console. So I want you to copy that and put that into Notepad or put it somewhere safe, because you will need this link a little bit later on. Once you've done that, all you need to do is go ahead and sign out, and we're going to sign in to our other AWS account. So I'm signing into my other AWS account now. I've entered in my username and password. You can see it's a Cloud Guru account B. And now what I want to do is go over to services, and I want to go down to security, identity, and compliance. I'm going to go down to IAM. So I'm in IAM, and I want to go over to users, and we're going to add a user. And we need to do this because you can't do this using the root account. So I'm going to call this username Ryan Cronenberg. And I'm going to give myself management console access. So we're in the management console. I'm not going to do programmatic access. We're going to cover that off in the next section of the course. I'm going to give myself a custom password. So just enter it in here. And then I'm not going to do a password reset. In here, I'm going to add my user to a group. So let's create a group, and we'll just call it administrator access. That's fine. So call it, this group name is admins. Go ahead and create the group. And we've attached a policy to that group. And of course, any user in that group is going to inherit the administrator access policy. So let's go ahead and hit next and create our user. So we've now created our user and they can sign in using this address. So why don't you copy that link to your clipboard? And then what I'm going to do is go ahead and log out. I've now navigated to that link and I'm going to type in my username. So Ryan Krunenberg. And then in here, I'm going to do my credentials, go ahead and sign in. And so I've now signed in as that user who has administrator access to this site. You can see my username up here. Now, if you have a look, we've actually got a new button. It says Switch Role. We can now click the Switch Role button. Now, in order to set this up, I want you to just paste that link that you had into your browser. You can go through here and fill this out, but you are going to have to remember the role name. So it's much easier to use that link that we saved earlier. So I pasted that into my browser and it's automatically filled out all the things that I need. And then all I'm going to do is go ahead and hit Switch Role. And I'll now be logged in to the other account. You can see up here S3 cross account access and then the account number. Now, if I go ahead and let's say I want to go into billing, I want to see how much this account is getting billed. Well, I won't have permissions for that. It says you need permissions. The only permissions that we gave to this role is to S3. So if I go over to services and go over to S3, I should be able to view all the buckets in there. There's no buckets in there right now, but I can go ahead and create a bucket. I'm just going to give it a random name and hit create. And then that bucket will then be created because I've got a S3 administrator access. So you can see I've been able to create that bucket. I won't be able to access any other AWS service though, because my permissions are literally just locked down to S3. So here I am in EC2, can't even see how many running instances there are, etc., etc. I could go ahead and try and launch an instance, but I'm not going to be able to do that simply because I don't have the permissions. The only thing I've got is the permissions to, and there you go, you can see an error code describing your selected AMI. The only permissions I've got is for S3. So it's pretty simple. That's how you set it up. Let's go over to my exam tips. So going into the exam, you're going to be asked what the 3 different ways are to share S3 buckets across accounts. So you can use bucket policies with identity access management, and bucket policies always applies across the entire bucket. You can't lock down individual objects, and this is programmatic access only. You can use bucket ACLs and identity access management. Again, bucket ACLs go down to the individual objects, but it is programmatic access only. And if you need console access, you do exactly what we just did. We go into the master account, we create a cross-account IAM role. We then go into the other account, make sure we've got a user that is set up in that other account, and then we just go over to the switch roles button, and then they'll be able to switch into the other AWS account and be able to do things depending on their level of permissions on that role. So that is it for this lecture, everyone. If you have any questions, please let me know. If not, feel free to move on to the next lecture. Thank you.